Why not? We'll make up some time. We'll make up some time. We can do it Friday.
Yeah, okay.
We'll have a lot to do.
And,
Oh, okay.
we accepted all the other minutes, just checking this. Accepted all those. Were received and approved. Oh, no, we didn't do the last two. And where are those?
I emailed them to everyone. I don't have a hard copy out for everybody here.
Yeah, so for Friday night, can you print out those two?
Yeah.
The last two is 11/26 and 12/17. I got this in all three of those minutes. Friday night, if that's okay with everyone.
Works for me.
Okay, yeah, and I sent you that, we should maybe talk about the minutes now, because I sent Ryan the law about the open meeting law where you have to have 30 days. It's according to the open meeting law, which we have not been doing, so we really have to try to stay on top of them as much as we can. But seeing that we're gonna be meeting 2 times a week and so many weeks in a row, I don't know if you can find out, Amy, do we have to go into detail on all, because we're having so many meetings, how much detail can we just say, like, we discussed this and this is what we did,
In the
decided?
minutes?
Huh?
You're talking about the minutes,
The minutes.
not the agenda?
No, not the agenda, no. Can you,
I don't know.
I don't know how much detail we have to, go ahead.
I can just tell you because I have to read the minutes of Gas and Electric, Housing Authority, all the rest of them. And all of these meetings are recorded. So anybody that really wanted to see every detail could go and watch every detail. I can tell you, look in some of the meetings, it's got, you know, $1 million question, and it says a brief discussion was held. And that's the extent of their minutes. So right now, I think this committee is putting out much more detailed minutes than, you know, I see from 90, you know.
Yeah, I would be curious about, because I also looked at the open meeting law guidance over the past week in connection with something completely different. I would be curious about whether the Attorney General has put out any guidance about a situation where, you know, obviously we do want to continue to produce written minutes, but everything is recorded and the public has instant access to the recordings, because that serves a great deal of the same purpose, obviously. And it might be that we have more leeway than we think in light of recent changes in the technology. I just don't know.
I don't think it was a concern before, but I think it is now because we're gonna have so many meetings. But I'm concerned that if something happened to the recording, we really wouldn't have the good.
Yeah, no, we should,
Hard copy back.
yeah.
So I don't know.
Can we summarize it some? Maybe like make it shorter, the minutes, like
Well,
summarize
that's
it?
Well, that was what I had been doing, and last time, that was where I said, look, you know, I feel terrible about this, but I just don't have the time that it takes to condense them and have them out within 30 days, as we should be doing. And, you know, I can go back to trying, but they're going to lapse because I find summarizing them ruthlessly is surprisingly time-consuming.
And especially since we're gonna have weeks, so.
I mean, I could contact someone at the open meeting law place where I've contacted them before to ask. Because I would think, like, maybe we could just focus on what decisions were made. You know,
The original item that we're discussing on the agenda.
yeah, what was discussed and then what decision was made. And if it was just discussion that didn't lead towards a decision, then maybe that doesn't have to be, you know, detailed.
And even if it does, we can just say and you know, unanimous or whatever. That definitely we should have. Oh, it was, if we took a vote on that particular, like the minutes, if we were gonna accept them, it should say acceptance of minutes, blah, 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 voted to accept, unanimous. You know, the vote, what the vote.
But,
Elaine, if I could.
yeah.
So one thing for like the city council too is when we get open meeting law requests or, you know, information, public information requests, like it goes through the clerk's office. And I'm not sure if we know, I mean, I don't know that we'd get one now, but I'm sure at some point we'd get a public information request. I wonder what our process would be, and if it wouldn't kind of behoove us to look into what, you know, if that would go through you as chair, or, I mean, it wouldn't seem like it would probably go through Amy as a project manager. Just doesn't seem like, maybe that is something that would be under her responsibility, I don't know, but.
The thing is, then I would direct them always to the recording first,
Sure.
and then hopefully
But aren't you the person who does minutes?
Yeah, I mean, so, I mean,
Well, I think public records requests are a different thing from the open meetings law.
Sure.
And they'd go through the clerk's office probably. But there are statutory who you apply to guidelines on that. And just because I happen to have the document itself up on my computer, the most recent guidance from the Attorney General's office that I'm aware of reads as follows. Public bodies are required to create and maintain accurate minutes of all meetings, including executive sessions. The minutes, which must be created and approved in a timely manner, must include the date, time, and place of the meeting, members present or absent, decisions made and actions taken, including a record of all votes, a summary of the discussions on each subject, a list of all documents and exhibits used at the meeting, and the name of any member who participated in the meeting remotely, which we don't do in Holyoke, so is irrelevant. But, you know, given this set of bullet points, you know, we're not listing the documents and exhibits. I don't know that any minutes created in Holyoke necessarily do. And, you know, maybe at some point when we're under a little less time pressure with the actual business of the committee, we ought to all just look at this and consider what we can do to come further into compliance with it, if having a full recording isn't sufficient.
Well, the only documents that I can think of offhand, except for is the original applications for eligibility and then the application for full applications now.
Wasn't there also a concern, though, about making sure, because we're going to have so many meetings, one after another, close together, that how are we going to have the minutes done, I mean, in a timely way for each meeting? And also, will Ryan be able to attend? Because Megan is busy with a newborn baby, so, yeah.
I did, and, you know, a lot of it will depend, of course, on the council. But, you know, Fridays I should have no problem with, because we never have meetings on Fridays. I was gonna ask, you know, you know, maybe talk to Andrew and see if it somehow, just because I know our only cost right now encumbered by this committee is the administrative cost, if maybe I should, you know, maybe not go to attend a certain meeting just to save on that cost, if we're starting to look at a pace that's doesn't add up with what we actually have for the year, you know. And that's something that I guess we can discuss as we get a little closer to if we start to feel a tight fit or something, you know. But I do feel like I can keep up with the minutes for now. You know, I mean, it's tough, yeah. I mean, because the meetings have been going for about 2 hours, and that's a lot of information to try to get in, because you still, in my opinion, have to watch and see. You don't want to miss something that could be important. The minutes are still what they ask for. You still have to, no matter what kind of detail the video gives, if we get a request in, we need to have minutes to give to people who make that request. So
I think
so
one way we could look into cutting down, because what I just listened to what Mimi said, like the summary, it seems like really you're doing much more detail than a summary. Like Mike is saying, you're saying so-and-so said this, then so-and-so said that. A summary would just be like, maybe you could just be, this was discussed, or, you know.
Yeah.
Or just like what we're doing now, if they're having a discussion about it, and whether.
And sometimes I do that from time to time, sure, and like I can maybe even do that more, and I can run it by the law department and see, because they'll be able to give us what is, you know, write down, you know, this is absolutely acceptable for minutes, and like I said, what Mike said was absolutely accurate. It really depends from board to board on the minutes, but as long as I think we're covering the topics that are discussed in a way, we're taking the votes down correctly and keeping any kind of documentation, I think we'll be in compliance with open meeting law, and just protect us in case, you know, somebody does want to file a complaint or whatever else might happen.
Discussion, so you look into that, Amy?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
minimum, whatever it is,
Yeah.
to still stay in compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other discussion? Item 2, review of applicant answers to email for documents.
Okay.
We take these
Yeah.
document for us, or?
No, but after the discussion, I can post something onto Google Drive based on what I'm going to talk about now. But yeah, so I emailed everyone today saying that I'm going to focus on 6, half of them, because I didn't get to review all of them, because I was spending all day yesterday sort of organizing everything I was getting. So today was the day to start reading through. So I want to go over 6 of them today. And the first is the Holyoke. Well, I'll say that the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club Park Project, Glowtech Property, Holyoke City Hall Stained Glass, the Annex Lanterns, Smith's Ferry Cemetery, and the Maple Street. Those are the ones I'd like to focus on. And just to give you a preview, I think that all of them seem pretty good from my perspective, except there are some questions about the Maple Street one. So I don't know if you've gotten to look at the responses at all. But anyway, shall I just go through? Okay, so Holyoke Boys and Girls Club Park Project at 70 Cosmos Way. I had asked if they were okay with the deed restriction for 5 years. I threw that out, meaning that they wouldn't be able to demolish or sell or whatever, or close to the public the park after it was built with CPA funds. And they said they don't think that will be a problem. The board of directors would have to vote on it. They'd like to modify the budget, though, to cover legal fees for that.
Only 5 years. That was the one thing. You can say that you want something different, but this was through my discussions with, since, people weren't really sure, this was my discussions with Alicia, because part of it is, as the playground has wear and tear, it's not going to be worth quite as much, so it would be kind of onerous to say, well, you have to return all the money you were given when it's like in the 4th year, when a lot of the, stuff would have, the playground equipment and things would be worn down at that point. So what were you thinking? No, I didn't have a number in mind. Mm-hmm. Because the Community Preservation Act kind of allows us to make, as it were, capital investments for major upgrades, but doesn't allow for maintenance, it seems to me that there is some question about whether we should be doing a fast depreciation schedule, as it were. Like, the idea is that we're buying something permanent and it should be maintained, with other dollars, as opposed to it's something that's going to become valueless in 5 years, and therefore it's okay if we don't recapture any of the money and the public doesn't have a benefit to it. And it seemed like a short time frame to me for...
Well, it could be 10 years. I mean,
yeah.
Nobody
And
really
no,
corrected the question, so.
Yeah, I didn't think... The only reason that I'm asking is not to attack the 5 years, but just what thinking led behind or led to it. And if the answer is, it just seemed like a number and we threw it out there,
Well, I think it was also something that the Office of Community Development has used as a good ballpark for this type of contract, so I was basing it on that.
My opinion is that I think 5 years is good, because I think if it's longer, it'll be them to... They'll have to, I didn't shut that off, I don't know why. That it would be onerous on them, that they would have to be concerned about that for 10 years, and that we would want something back after 5. I think that that's a good, even number that, after that, I don't think we should be still, keeping them under our purview, you know what I mean? I think 10 years is too long, and I think 5 years is a good even number of years, so.
I would just assume, I will check further into this and talk to Alicia.
Okay.
It seems short to me. Because again, these are supposed to be capital improvements, they're supposed to be a wasting asset.
I mean, I can ask her also, she's been away, but,
Yeah, but, you know, if this is fine by everybody, fine. It's just, I think that the programs she administers may not be as focused on, this is a permanent improvement.
that's a good point.
Right, it's a permanent improvement, but it's not going to, you know, after 5 years, it's going to be used, so it's,
It's going to be used.
yeah, so I don't think that we should be concerned after 5 years,
I
but
mean, I
that's
can
just my
also
opinion.
check in with some other CPA communities to find out if they have, or look into it, you know, if they've done similar projects.
Do you want to take a vote on it, or just right now and then solve it, or do you want to just
I think we should
have-
think
look
about
it up, look
and
it up?
research
Okay.
it, yeah.
All right, okay, what?
I respectfully kind of disagree with that.
Oh.
We've already heard from Alicia Zoller and what they do. The real reason for this restriction at all is we put this kind of money in, we don't want them to turn around. If somebody comes around and offers to build an apartment block and give them $250,000 for that lot 2 years from now. That's, you know, and that's just a wild assumption. I think this covers it. 5 years is plenty. Let's not beleaguer the, go beyond that point. Bang our heads against the wall, and that's enough, you know?
Okay,
Well,
I think,
so would someone like to make a motion then, or?
So can I ask a procedural question here? So we're having a discussion about the details of an agreement with a boys club. We've picked 5 years. Which I assume is, I'll assume it's fine. I'm not saying it is, but this is to make a point. Then the boys club has to go to their board of directors and get approval of it. Then there has to be some deed restricted drafted. Like when are we approving all of the terms of this and then recommending that this project goes for, like,
Much
what, it
later.
seems like we're narrowing things, but we're not getting it
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
When do we,
No, I think my assumption has always been that we don't vote on any of these until we have been through the public hearing process and have all the information in front of us.
Right.
So my question was not directed at trying to make a decision now. It was just, what was the thinking behind this question with, or being phrased in these terms? The question originally, you know, which, you know, I believe Amy just needed to pick a number, and she did pick a number, and I have no quarrel with that for these purposes whatsoever. But the original question was basically, okay, guys, you've put in this application, we will need some kind of deed restriction. Are you okay with that?
Right.
And the answer is yes. So I was just
Right,
dropping a footnote here.
and I don't wanna,
but we want to tell them now if it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, we want to tell them now,
however.
or as soon as possible, before we
So-
go
so
too
we-
far.
So there are members that are not here, and then we're gonna, and I don't know how a vote on 5 years would go here, I'm not suggesting we have one. But at some point, this committee's gonna vote to recommend any project, and this project will be subject to a vote, whether we're gonna recommend it for funding or not.
Right,
So there could be committee members that are not here that think it should be 10 years, and they're gonna vote no, because we voted 5 years and.
But
so
the
it's like,
majority
how do
rules.
we-
Right.
It's like we're
but
negotiating
the,
by,
right,
no, there's a quorum,
They-
right?
maybe I'm missing
yeah.
it, help me if I'm missing it, I hope I am.
yeah,
No,
There's a quorum here, so if we vote,
yeah,
then we don't need the other
We're not
votes.
voting to recommend.
Oh, no, I
the
know,
project.
but for the-
We're
for the
voting
limit
to
of the
say,
5
"Okay,
year."
We think 5 years is reasonable, but that doesn't bind any other member to vote up or down on the project because we voted that we thought 5 years
No.
was good enough.
I
that's,
don't
yeah.
understand why we're even considering voting at this point on any
I don't
term
either.
of this.
Only because we want to be able to tell them now how many years to make their deed restriction,
They
that's
can't
all.
make a deed restriction now.
Yeah,
We haven't been
that's not gonna
through the
happen.
public hearing process. We don't have all the information behind for us. We cannot make any respectable recommendation about anything until all the information is in and we can consider it as a whole.
But they have to prepare a deed restriction for
No, they
us.
don't.
No,
It's
they
gonna
don't.
happen later, though.
Probably our vote
Then why
would
are we
be-
bringing it up
well,
now
our
then?
vote would be
I have no idea.
Because we
I know that I'm leaving at 8. I have to leave at 8.
We need to
so-
start, we're trying to learn what
Yeah.
we can agree on. That's what we're in this negotiation stage, so that we can know how to shape and write this contract.
That's right.
Eventually. So
I feel like,
I'm shocked by, that we would just suddenly say, okay, we're doing 5 years, because Mimi has raised something valid that I think we should, there's
But-
no
but-
harm. We have the time to think about it,
okay,
because
fine.
we haven't even met with the applicants yet.
that's fine. But they're gonna have to come with the deed restriction.
No, they're not coming with a deed.
When they come in front of us, they don't have to have the deed restriction.
No, that's not how it works.
Let a vote that-
It's at the time
But
of the
I'm not gonna vote
contract.
on it unless I know how long their deed
Well,
restriction's
that's the
for.
thing, we're gonna have to agree to, this is my point, I negotiate a lot of agreements. We're negotiating, this is a very difficult process to negotiate through, because not all the parties who are gonna get to vote, even though we could say,
But they might not be here that night either, so,
it may not be.
no, so
And the
don't worry about
Boys and
that.
Girls Club, so I don't, maybe I'm getting, I don't, I'm just, what do we wanna communicate back to the Boys Club to say, okay, you've answered all of our questions, you're willing to do a deed restriction, maybe we ask them, are you willing to do 5 years, 10 years? Get an answer from them, and then the project goes forward through the rest of the process with our understanding that that is what it's going to be for deed restriction, and then we're voting whether we think it's a good project or not, or priority project.
Well, it takes time
This
to
is-
do a deed restriction, so I think they need as much
We
time
would
as
be
they.
the ones who would be doing the deed restriction and recording it with the Registry of Deeds, but they would be paying for it partially out of the funding
Right,
that
but I
you-
think we should tell them how many years we want it. And
Okay,
that's-
all we're saying is that we don't
disagree
need to
we
decide
Give
that.
them some guidance, because if
right
we
now.
said
Right.
100 years, they might say
Right,
we don't want it.
exactly.
Yeah, right, exactly.
There's probably members of the committee who would say 1 year is good, 5 years is good, 5 years isn't good, and so how do we,
The
I think
majority,
the same way we do any other
Yeah,
project
majority.
with a lot of moving parts. We keep refining the questions until we know exactly what we want.
okay.
At some point, we talk to them and we see what works for them. We talk to the legal authorities and see whether the fact that we're supposed to be making capital improvements is in any way a problem for having a very short-term deed restriction. And when we have all the facts, it seems to me, then we can evaluate. Because at this point, we can't ask them to start a deed restriction. We don't even know if we're going to recommend this for funding.
Right,
Right.
so,
If we do, we don't know whether the city council will accept it. It is premature to have them do any work that they
but we need to tell them whatever, we need to tell them how many years we want the deed restriction, because maybe if we say 10 years, they'll say, we don't want to go forward then.
Have you
So-
read their submission?
Yeah.
They want to go forward.
Yeah, they definitely want to go forward.
Well, I'm just saying, that
yeah,
we
this is
should
a
give them
simple
some,
issue.
yes.
In fact, they might even agree to a 10-year deed restriction,
I just think it's, yeah.
It's
Well,
raises
that's,
these questions.
okay.
The really simple issue, when we get to the complicated one, so what are we doing? We ask them questions, they've given us responses, you're communicating to us what those responses have been. And then we're not taking any further action at this point other
well, I
than
think we
hearing
should
the
express
response.
our opinions
I
at
think
this point
that,
in
yeah,
time.
we're having a discussion,
Yeah.
plus some of these question and answers bring up new questions, which will be important for when we meet the applicants, face to face, so.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, I am just modeling this on other public bodies that I've served on, but my impression of this process is we are gathering information. Every set of questions you get answers to raises new questions, or else it puts things completely to bed. Like their response to this round of questions, it seemed to me, was very clear that they're relying on us for funding. They can raise some money from People's Bank, they hope, but that funding is very much contingent on getting our funding first. They are relying to a huge extent on us even for the phase two. They made that clear. You know, we had questions about it and they answered it. And, you know, they came up with a nice clear answer to the question about 5 years. And I was just curious about whether that was okay under our guiding statute. Because, you know, yes, I should have caught this when Amy first sent it out and asked then, but I didn't. So we have other bites at the apple. But this, you know, if you've been on planning boards, so it's the same process. You send out questions, the applicant comes back and answers them. If it raises more questions, you send them back to answer them again. Or you say,
If
we're
the
done.
majority wants you to.
If the majority wants you to, but in general, if a substantive question is raised, I mean, certainly the body can ignore this and decide we're not going to ask them any more questions. But that's,
No, just regarding that particular issue, not any more questions, just that. How long the deed restriction should be.
I'm sorry.
no, I think that was a good question, I thought.
So,
Okay.
so we're gonna communicate back to, we probably do need.
Whatever the
What are
wish,
we gonna communicate back to
whatever
them
the
in
wish of the
response to their
committee.
answers?
Whatever you want.
Their answers
Well,
are
I think-
adequate and,
I think for next week, everybody should be thinking about, you know, what questions they want to ask when the applicants come in and meet in person, you know, based on these discussions.
Yeah.
Because that's what next week is going to be.
Yeah,
believe,
and my
yeah.
question about the time, just to be perfectly clear, was not directed at them. It was, is this okay? And I want to check to make sure that it is from our point of view and that we can really do it before we commit to them. So, you know, I would not be checking with them. I would be checking with, like, the Community Preservation Trust.
and assuming.
Is that the wish
they're-
of the committee that you want her to look that up? Or are you happy with the
Yes.
5 years? I mean, you know,
Well,
do you want her to do that?
Both, I'm both. I'm happy with the 5 years as long as that, you know, the trust. Or
The coalition.
In conformance with the law and past practices of other CPs.
They just say we need some kind of deed restriction to protect, you know, the public money, you know, the city's investment, but not, you know, what particular deed it is. That's up to this committee, so, yeah. So we have a lot more to discuss, and we wanted to leave at 8:20, so that's okay. Still on Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, I asked about how they, you know, think they'll be able to leverage funds, and, you know, just, and this comes across in the application, that CPA is the primary catalyst for the funding, and depending on the actual award they were to get, and the timing of the award, that will influence, you know, what other funds they can leverage. They did say they requested $40,000 from People's Bank, and they could get anywhere from $5,000 to $40,000 from them, so. And then I asked about their timeline. They said that if they got the award on May 19th, then the club would finalize the contractual labor within 60 days of the grant contract. And then phase one would start September 2019 and end October 2019. This is the basketball court and the green infrastructure. And phase two, if awarded, would be March to May 2020. They have to keep to a rigid timeline because of heavy use of the park by, you know, children in the neighborhood. So, and then I asked about maintenance. I think someone mentioned this. Do they have sufficient maintenance to maintain it? They do have, and this was in the application, one full-time director of operations and 2 part-time maintenance staff who work 25 hours a week. And so it's not a lot, but they said they have members of the community who respect the park, and, you know, that was their answer to that. I also asked them if they got money for phase one and not phase two in this round, would that impact their ability to complete or leverage funds for phase one? Maybe that makes no sense, I'm not sure, but they said no, they will, let's see, if they get the money for phase one, they should be fine with leveraging the funds for phase one, but they'll need money for phase two in order to leverage funds for that. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So they did submit a financial audit, and you know, I'm not really someone who's looked at a lot of financial audits, but the opinion that I read said that the auditor, it seemed favorable, like that the financial statements ending for June 30th, 2018 were in keeping with accounting principles accepted in the US. So I don't know if there's, so that's everything I have for the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay,
Okay, move on to the next.
yep.
Okay, so the Glowtech property, Rock Valley Road. There were just a few things I asked for from them. One was information about ownership, because if you remember, it was still in Bruce Glowtech's name, but we were told that that Marcia Cassidy, his partner, inherited it. But anyway, so what they did send me was an email from the Marcia Cassidy's lawyer, his name is Mark Donahue, confirming that Marcia Cassidy's estate inheritance from Bruce Glowtech, just confirming that, you know, she has this inheritance. And they understand, you know, Kestrel and the Conservation Committee, they understand that an order must be received from the probate court before funds can be awarded. So this is the most we have. And for me, it was a first step to just wanting to know, okay, can we have some proof that she really does own it?
Yeah, we have to have proof of
And
ownership.
this is what we have at this point, and I checked with Crystal, and she said that seems sufficient for now, but it's just that, you know, we'll need the order from the probate court before funds can be awarded.
Okay. That makes sense.
Do we have a sense of the timing of the court?
I can ask again, but,
It seems, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm not the lawyer.
yeah.
It's gonna be 2 years.
Well, we did get a purchase and sale agreement, which was just dated, you know, or yesterday, January 22nd, 2019, signed by Scott Jackson, who's the chair of Kestrel's board of directors, but it's assignable, so they can assign it to the city, who would really be purchasing the land through the Conservation Commission. And it says the land will be sold on or before. Yeah, but I know what you're saying. We need to know this before that, yeah.
Yeah, we do.
But it says on or before May 22nd, 2019, and the sale price would be $157,000. It's been reduced from $3,000. It was originally $160,000, and that's because it's a little like 1.1 acres less, because part of that is Marcia Cassidy wants to keep, I guess. So it's a little bit less. And they sent a map showing now what the perimeters are. But yeah, I can try to ask if they know the timing, but there was a lot of emails back and forth about that issue, about,
Yeah, we have to have proof of ownership before we have to have that proof from the court.
well, yeah,
court.
before funds can be awarded, but maybe a contract could still be, you know, because we do have the lawyer saying that, you know, and I have that in writing in an email, and Crystal seemed to think that was enough for now. Crystal Barnes, who's
For now, yes, but before we award the funds, we have to have
right,
that
that's what
proof.
I've said, yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I'm kind of wondering, though, does that mean that we will know before we start the work of drawing up the contract?
Well, we won't be able to if there's no proof of ownership yet. If the probate court hasn't made a ruling, then
Yeah.
we can't do it.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, also, I got a letter from the Conservation Commission approving this sale and agreeing to own the land in fee and to work with Kestrel Trust on it. Let's see what else. The purchase, as I mentioned, the purchase and sale is a little bit less. Originally, they were saying that they were going to swap out 1 acre for another, but that's not happening. But it's, you know, it's about 52 acres, maybe a little less. And the other thing I'm waiting for is a new budget from them. He had mentioned, Lee Halaz of Kestrel, that he would send that. Because they had added, if you remember, they had added more. They had said we need $10,000 for a new survey done and $5,000 for legal fees. So he's going to try to give that to me before the Friday meeting, so we can discuss that then.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Questions?
Do you have another one on Kestrel?
What do you mean another one?
Another question and answer?
No.
Okay, so I'd like to give everybody, this is from the city's own conservation and sustainability webpage. All right? And the land area in Hoyoke is 12,000 acres, right?
Thank you.
Hoyoke is 12,000 acres. 7,000 acres are forest already, all right? And what we would do here is, in effect, we would take and add another 52 acres, when we've already got 7,000 acres. Now, not only that, by doing this deal with Kestrel, it puts a permanent restriction on that property. If 25 years from now, the city decides they want to put housing in there, market rate housing, no. These deals with Kestrel, they're forever. There's no one doing them, right? And we've already got, think about it, 7,000 acres. Now, this is about community preservation. How much more do we need?
Can I just mention, though, that we
I
do have, okay.
Just
I was just going to give you some information. All right.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
we get to, we've got a very limited amount of funds, okay? $175,000 of our money to add 52 acres to the existing 7,000. We've got programs, if you take just what the Boys Club, the YMCA, and the rest of the youth we have growing up in the city, I've worked with dozens and dozens of kids that still don't even know where the New England Trail is, where the Mount Tom Reservation is, where Whiting or Ashley Reservoir is, all right? We need community, this is about community preservation, right? Not trying to turn Hoyoke into the Yosemite of the East.
But it's also about open space.
It is about open
And
space.
recreation.
Yes, and we have lots of open space already, more than we can already deal with, more than we can use, more than we have plenty of access. To add access to more open space right now, to me, is an absolute waste of community preservation money.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I am sorry to jump in like this, but this goes to the merits of the application. It is not what we are discussing. I mean, many of us have strong feelings about it, and in fact, as many of you know, I strongly disagree with what was just said. But this is not the time. We have a ton of questions and answers to get through, and if we start debating the merits of every one of these proposals, we are not going to do the actual work of the committee.
If I may. Yeah, you bring up a good point, he brings up a good point, I think we should think about that, but my question now would be, is that land developable? Can they put houses? It's my understanding that they
only
can't.
2 houses, but I also want to mention that we have, no matter what, a certain amount of money is going to be reserved. 10% of the money collected is reserved each year. So that money will grow and grow if nothing is ever spent on open space.
Right,
And
well-
here we have, you have before you a
Right.
pretty clear-cut project. So, I mean, are you never going to use the money and all the money is going to end up tied up and you can't use it for anything but open space?
Not the merits of the project, but that 10% category is open space and recreation, correct?
Correct.
So it can be diverted, it doesn't happen, we don't have to spend any money on open space, we can spend all our money on recreation.
Oh, I suppose it is one category.
No,
Mhm.
And not, again, not the merits of it, I just
Okay.
don't want to, for the record.
Okay, so can we get some kind of opinion from someone? Yeah, I don't know if it's the Conservation Commission, what's the developability of that property? If it's not,
Well, we did hear.
yeah, if they can't develop it, then, what's the point of worrying about whether we have an open space or not, It's not, so that's my question now, you
I
can
mean,
add
lots
that.
of property that can't be developed is conserved.
Right, that's right, exactly, and that's, yeah.
And
Maybe we should hear from Parks and Recreation on it also.
I mean, there's a nice little park there, right? Right now,
There's a park there now.
yeah,
Yeah.
and abuts this property. When you think about putting $100,000 into that park, what the park would look like. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying that
I agree
this is a
that-
good or bad proposal. I think you raise a good point about when we're allocating this money to open space and recreation, how do we prioritize that?
Right.
And whether this land is developable or not is certainly a consideration and prioritizing.
Rosemary said 2 houses, but that's what she said.
I don't think she was sure, so I'd like, if either Rosemary or someone from Conservation can
Okay,
answer that question, that would be
Okay.
good. And
Developable.
is it developable? Yeah.
okay.
And do they have the frontage to, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what that means,
is-
yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good question.
That will be a good question to ask them when they come in person, too.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't want us ambush them with that one.
Libby, are
Oh,
you
well, I
still-
could also email them the question
Are
in
you,
advance.
you're still on Parks?
Yes.
Committee,
Yeah.
are you the chair?
I'm the chair.
Okay, so
Yeah.
can we ask you to bring that up to your committee? too, and
Absolutely.
ask
I'm
them
meeting
if
with
they-
them on
if
the
they're-
31st.
Okay, see what they say.
And so the
about
question
this.
specifically, but thank you for this information.
Mm-hmm.
And the question was about our park, right? The park that we have
Yeah,
there?
what, do they have any plans for it in the future? What do they see happening there?
How heavily is it used now?
Mm-hmm,
Does it need to have 52 acres added to it
okay.
because it's so overused?
They don't wanna do, they don't wanna do anything with it. If it's open space, can they still have the park there and the,
Oh, yeah, that was the whole idea of the application, was this would be, there is a public access through the park that already exists. That was,
Okay.
laid out in the application and in the maps. They
Okay.
show where the Glue Tech Park is and how it would connect to this area.
okay?
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay.
Shall we move
It's an
on? or-
interesting open space because it potentially is open space and passive recreation.
That's true. Yeah, because you can walk around, yeah.
If that's the plan, I would like to make that clear that, yeah, I mean, I told you I went there and visited, I walked around the beautiful hiking trails there, it was gorgeous. So, but I guess I would wanna know that that's part of the Kestrel plan is to keep it, and it may be in their application, I'd have to go back and look, but is it intended to be, have access for passive recreation as part of the preservation of the land?
Yeah, that was in the application, passive, as well as conservation,
That's,
Yeah.
that's like having
as
your-
well as conservation of the
Let's just
forest
confirm
land.
that. And
Okay, so the next one is the stained glass windows restoration, Holyoke City Hall. And for $75,000, and I had asked, let's see, or I think Elaine, you brought this up, what is the timeline for the matching grant for the Massachusetts Preservation Project Fund?
Right.
I was told the deadline is in February, and the notification for that is in March, and that if they don't get funding, they could scale back to 1 window rather than the 3 windows, or go to another local fund. I also asked, what is Plan B, let's see, about the scope of work if the funding match is lower. And they said, again, the scope of the window restoration will be scaled back within the available budget. There's no other sources of funding. They had submitted to the mayor and, the mayor and DPW had submitted a bond request to city council for a match, but that request was denied.
Yeah.
I asked, what is the proposed end date? It's, and they said July 2020 would be the end date. What are the exact steps in the timeline? And Mike McManus wrote back of DPW. He didn't really give exact steps. He just said they'll know better once the CPA and the MPPF money is awarded, and then the city will issue a request for bids for restoration of the stained glass windows and award the project if the bids are within budget. So that kind of surprised me because I thought they already knew which contractor they were going with. I thought it was Serpentino, because that was in the application. So
That's who they've been having,
I might ask another question about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
unless they went out of business or something, but that's who's been doing it.
And let's see, I asked, why is the MHC project report unsigned on page 1? He didn't answer that question. It was for work done on the first 2 windows, but I know that work has been done on them. I've seen it, but I didn't, I just wondered. I asked who will oversee that this meets with the U.S. Secretary of the Interior standards. Would it be Julie Sloan, the consultant, which was mentioned in the application, and will the cost be included in the funding? And they said yes to all of that. And this full $150,000 needed would be the amount needed to restore the 3 stained glass windows, windows 9, 11, and 12. I actually, walked around, the ballroom with Olivia Moselle, and she showed me which windows. So that's everything for that one.
Okay.
The annex lanterns in City Hall for $500. I asked, one of the questions that came up was who's responsible for mounting those and lighting the lanterns, what about the electricity? And Olivia Moselle, who's, the Friends of City Hall person, she said that there's solar lighting already, so they might not be needed, but Mike, DPW, said that they would mount the lights and hire an electrician to make sure the lights are adequately wired and lit. And really, HG&E has nothing to do with that, which is what Olivia had mentioned before. They would get an on-call electrical contractor, not through HG&E, and the work would be funded through the existing city budget, he said. And he's a co-applicant with Olivia Moselle. I asked which parts of the lantern will be repaired, which will be replaced, and basically, they're not using any original parts. It's just going to be a replication of the 2 lanterns, because I guess the ones that were, messed up are beyond repair. So they would be replicating them because exactly as they were. And when I met once with Olivia Moselle, and she said something about how the cost might be more than what they're asking for to replicate them, and basically, they said if the costs exceed the award money, they would existing city budgets would be used to fund the project, and if it was a small enough difference. But if the cost difference is excessive, alternative sources would be sought, they said. She also mentioned to me at one point that Camille Peters, he's the metal worker, is finding this project very difficult, and I asked, can they confirm that he can do it, and they just said that they're going to do their best to ensure that it gets done. So.
And our other concern about that was the building itself. How long is the building going to
Yeah,
last?
I've talked to other people, though, and I even talked to the building inspector, Damien Coate, I think his name is, and he said the building is structurally, he doesn't see that the building is going to be torn down in 5 years, so.
Okay.
It's the annex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Smith's Ferry Cemetery restoration on Route 5 for $5,300. I think Mike had asked, could the quality and timeliness of prior work be verified? And so the applicants for this are Parks and Recreation, by the way, and Olivia Moselle of the Friends of Holyoke Historic Cemeteries. And they said, actually, Terry Shepard, I think her name is, of Parks, said, has seen and approved of the high-quality repair work done in the past by this contractor, and the PowerPoint presentation of last year's workshop was submitted. And actually, it's in the application. It does look very thorough. And they didn't really give a specific answer to the timeline question, or how quickly it will be done. Oh, actually, I think that's later on. Another question was, could the work be done in stages if they were funded under 100%? And Olivia said, yes, this is possible, and so did Terry. The number of gravestones to be repaired would be based on the amount received. So it's, they're saying at a minimum, I think it's 8 to 10 minimum, but if it was less funding, they would just repair fewer gravestones. what are the actual items of expenditure? I think that, well, Olivia said she would get back to me about this, but there was only one project quote for everything. And I think Terry Shepard misunderstood because she just told me that they're going to be using epoxy, D2, and biological solution and plastic scrapers. So I think I was trying to get to like what's the breakdown of expenses for each thing. So she might have misunderstood that question. So I can ask her again. Let's see. Oh, I want to mention, Olivia had mentioned that the weather's, that this work is somewhat weather dependent, of course, because it's outdoors. But it seems like it can be done in 2 weeks, you know, weather dependent. And how much funding did DPW provide? It was $2,000 for the workshop. So that was the past work done. Yeah, so as I mentioned, 2 weeks, weather dependent because it's outdoor work. And who would be the project manager? And this was kind of odd because I assumed it would be somebody from Parks and Rec, but Terry Shepard said a supervisor from DPW. So I don't know why DPW and not Parks would be the project manager, and she didn't give a specific name. So I might ask about that again.
Well, they maybe do maintenance.
Oh, yeah, the
They do
parts,
the
the
all the
DPW
maintenance.
is the one
Yeah, I
that,
think.
Yeah, but the question was who will be the project manager? In other words, who's going to be overseeing this project, you know? And I assumed it would be Terry Shepard or somebody at Parks.
probably gonna be John.
Is
and
that
they're on
somebody
the
at-
DPW,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
what's John's last name?
Chuhig, I think,
What's
John
that?
Chuhig, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
John
How do you
Tewitt,
spell that?
yeah.
W-O-I-G,
T-O-H,
Wait, start again.
yeah,
T-W-A-O-H-I-G.
just like yeah, Chuhig.
T-W-O-H-I-G.
Okay. And that's somebody
Might
from
be him.
DPW,
Yeah,
maybe.
He does a
Okay.
lot of the overseeing of
Okay,
it.
I guess they haven't determined, all right. So that's not unusual, you're saying then?
No,
for
it's not
somebody from
unusual.
DPW to
Right.
oversee? Okay, even though it's a Parks project, okay.
Right.
So I had also asked, will this project include creating a historic document or a record for a historic society? And if so, will some of the expenses go toward that? Because that was kind of loosely mentioned in the application. And there is a plan to put a booklet together, and it would go to Parks, DPW, the History Room, and City Historian. But she didn't really say anything about expenses. However, Olivia Moselle said it wouldn't be part of the funding, you know, that the funding wouldn't go towards this specific, the booklet. So, and I don't think that would be applicable because it would be more for like preserving a historic document, not creating a new booklet. So I also asked, will descendants of families need to be notified, or will they be notified to be, you know, if there are any of them living, to be done on the gravestones? The park said it's nearly impossible to determine the descendants. The public hearing notice will be posted, though. And she didn't specify, oh, and that Parks and Rec would pay for that public notice. So I guess that wouldn't come out of this budget. I asked about if a permit will be issued for this work. Park said yes, basically that's no problem. They issue permits all the time for this sort of thing. And that's pretty much it for that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so last one for today. Maple Street, John Tansey, Down Home LLC, or Down Home Properties, which is 346 to 350 Maple Street and 352 to 356 Maple Street. So I have a lot on this one. Okay, so my main question was, you know, can he provide proof that he owns 346 Maple Street, because it was still listed in Craig Crouch's name on the Registry of Deeds. And he said in his response, a closing was scheduled for 346, 350 Maple Street for November 30th. That was the day that he submitted the application. But Dr. Crouch is in breach of this contract, and appropriate steps are being taken to address this situation. So he still doesn't own this, that he's, you know, and he's asking for funds for units that in this building that he doesn't yet own.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I don't really see at this point, you know, how to go forward with that, but maybe looking at the other units that he wants to do work on.
Well, that's important, just to make sure that we have proof of the ownership.
Right, exactly. So,
We can't move forward either without that,
He
so.
owns some, but
well,
not
he does
all.
own, yes, exactly. I'm saying that he does own the other units that are at 352 to 356, although within that, there's an owner occupied apartment that he doesn't own. It's very complicated, but he sent me the deeds for those units. I think it's like 3 units that he owns in that one. The interesting thing is when I spoke to him on the phone about, when I first was trying to reach him to ask about, you know, I don't see you listed as owning this other property, he said, and I said, what you're saying, that, well, we can't award, you know, if you don't own it. And he said, well, Craig Crouch was listed as a co-applicant. And I checked the application. He was not listed as a co-applicant. And my thought was, you know, even if he were, I don't know that that would be such a great place to, you know, I mean, you have to really think before awarding funds. If somebody owes this amount in back taxes, which is over $24,000, so, and is also now in breach of contract, so there's a lot to think about there. So I guess my question, based on what he said, was, you know, that I want to ask, or, you know, you might want to ask, is would he want to go ahead with, you know, requesting CPA funds for the renovations on the buildings that he does own in the event that this purchase is never finalized for the 346 to 350?
But in the property that he does own, within that property, there's an owner occupied?
Yeah. Right, and that concerns me a little,
Right.
because I'm wondering if he's making these renovations, what if that person, you know, does that mean that it wouldn't be done over that particular person's apartment, or that that person will be like, sure, go ahead and do it? You know what I mean? It seems a little bit
Well,
confusing.
maybe that person should become a co-applicant with him on that, if they want to become one. That would be helpful to us if that were the case. Now he'll
Okay,
have
then
to
we would
go-
have a whole other person to review. But maybe it's like a back apartment that's not really part of the renovation. So it's a little unclear from his applications, you know, his application, you know, which proposed renovation is for which unit. You know, there's, in one part of it, he didn't really specify, so I had to ask about it. Let's see, yeah, but the unit that's 354 3R is owner occupied by a private owner. He mentioned this in his response. And he attached like 5 deeds that he sent to me that are for the other ones between 352 and 356 Maple Street that he does own.
5 of the 6 units he owns, supposedly. I haven't reviewed the deeds, but he did send them. He also sent a tax return, which I haven't looked at yet.
Well, he said he was going to send a tax return, but he ended up having his accountant send a profit and loss statement. Did you get a tax return? Because he said he was going to, but then he hadn't. He said it's not submitted yet. And I said, well, do you have one from 2017 that you can send? And he didn't really respond to that, didn't submit it. So all I have is this 1-page thing and it's a lot of loss. But he hopes to recoup this, you know, after making these renovations, I guess, having from the tenants.
Presumably, the reason we asked for this was some proof of financial wherewithal to actually do the work.
Right.
And it looked like the profit and loss was going to give us that kind of assurance.
So do you think we should ask for something more than the profit and loss? Like, because I had asked for an audit, on the business or financial report
No,
or a tax
I think
return.
you've already asked for everything
Okay.
we need to see. This is just editorializing on what we have so far.
Okay, but I'm just saying, is this like enough for you? You know?
Well, are we concerned that he won't be able to get someone to do the work because he won't be able to pay up front? Is that what you're concerned? Because, you know, we pay as they do the work. So is that what you mean by
I didn't
not-
think about that, but that is a good point. I guess also just seeing, you know, is this somebody who really does follow up on his obligations, and, you know, and has he,
Well, he's gonna have to do the work, because we're not gonna pay him anything until he shows us invoices.
right, but, you know, you end up, you know, sealing off this pocket, you know, pot of money for something that, you
Yeah.
know, so.
Yeah,
Well,
no, I think
right.
the question is whether it's a viable project. Because if the applicant doesn't have enough funding to make it a viable project, as Amy says, then we're tying up whatever we award him until it's proved that he can't do it.
Okay. But when I asked about how he's going to pay all this money if he does make that sale with Craig Crouch, you know, he said all the liens and the back taxes will be paid out of the seller's proceeds from the sale at closing. But he didn't say whether there's, you know, a payment plan with a city or anything, but maybe that doesn't affect him because at this point it's really still in Craig Crouch's name, the other property, so. I asked some other specific questions about the application because that was unclear to me. He said the interior of the 5 units that Down Home owns, you know, that he owns at 352 to 356 Maple Street have been fully renovated. And so it's exterior work for those. Let's see what else.
Which is good, because that's all we can do is exterior work.
Well, some of it seemed unclear. He said, I didn't know what RNIP is, but I guess you probably all know, Rental Neighborhood Improvement Program, which I guess he's had funds from before. And he said, yeah, the Community Development Office administers these federal funds, and the program is operated by One Holyoke. The funds were used for renovation of 3 of the condo units and some improvements to common areas and the front porch. The back porches were painted using these funds. So, and then I asked about a budget detail he had because it was unclear which units that it would be, the work would be done on. And he said, let's see. Oh, again, this was about the exterior, interior, and it was all exterior. But then I also asked, there's something about facade work, and it's unclear which building that work will be done on. And he said the garage door repair relates to 346, 350, and the masonry repair and repointing is on both buildings, but mostly for 352 to 356 Maple Street. So it's just a little confusing about how it's laid out, and I'd like to ask him to sort of submit a clearer budget about like where the work would, which buildings, you know, the work would be done on. I had asked him about like repair of the garage door and if that was historic rehabilitation. He said the initial proposal included replacement of the garage doors behind 346 to 350 Maple Street with a more historically appropriate set of doors. In order to keep costs to a minimum, the final proposal includes only repair of the existing door. So I guess it's just 1 door, not 2. But that's still confusing to me. And I asked about earlier renovation he did in the budget on page 7 and whether that was historic rehabilitation or just regular renovations. He said regular renovations that are being proposed for 346 to 350 Maple Street. The note to committee also refers to regular renovations that have already been completed on 3. So I'm a little confused if he's now saying that some of the renovations he wants to do are not historic. So that was my follow-up question for that, since that wouldn't be allowable.
Amy, does the work include window replacement or renovations? I seem to remember
I
that
there was a
question about windows, and
let me see if.
I didn't know if we followed up on that.
Let me see. Street. Front porch rails, columns, doors, roof, masonry, repointing windows. So yeah, at least it did mention windows.
Yeah, I don't think we can do
Well,
windows.
repointing windows, I don't think makes sense, because you repoint masonry.
Yeah.
You might reglaze windows, or you might add like putty to.
Oh, repointing, comma, masonry repointing, comma, and then windows. I was just writing, jotting it all down. So,
Bye, Libby, thank you.
bye, thanks. So basically, just so that
Friday?
you know,
Okay.
in a nutshell, most of the funds requested are for the units he doesn't yet own, 22,277. And there's, I was estimating, it's a little unclear with his budget, that about 12,450 is for what he actually owns, from what I can see.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Okay, that most of the funds he requested are for, from what I'm understanding of his application, are for the unit he does not own at this point. The one that has, the guy has breached the contract for, the 346 Maple Street. And so that the funds for that is, is $22,277. But I estimate, it's a little unclear from what he said, that the amount that would go towards the one he owns is about $12,450. But that's not exact, because he wasn't that clear about which building. So.
Can I just ask if anybody else is concerned about repairs that are historic versus repairs that are just normal repairs? And is this done under any kind of supervision? Yeah, it is?
Well, I mean, that is one thing that has to be figured out, is who's going to oversee that it follows the U.S. Secretary of the Interior standards.
Yeah, because it sounds like a little bit of a mishmash of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. This will be good. This will be conventional. This will be historic. I don't know that we're going to get
We can only do the historic, so.
Well, that's why I had that question in there about, are all these repairs historic,
So, wouldn't we want the whole appearance to be historic, not just little bits and pieces?
Well, the building itself is already historic, the brick building,
But it's a good point. Maybe there are some facades, like if, there are definitely some that probably are not, that'll be on that line of
It's not a
buildings.
historic district. I think it's not a district, but a historic.
Well, it's across from the
all those-
library.
All
yeah.
those
They're all
brown
built
stones.
around the same, yeah.
Yeah, they're all historic. I think the Historical Commission has made them historic.
Well, they've, acknowledged the,
They acknowledge their
That the ones he
historical
applied
value,
for,
or
yeah.
whatever you want to call it. They've acknowledged that historical value. So whoever has done work on those on the outside, they've had to follow historic. So.
I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think what
They've had
happened
to,
is
yeah.
they gave a letter confirming that the ones that John Tansey is applying for funds for CPA.
I'm not talking about him in particular. I'm
Right, but
talking
let me
about all
finish.
the others.
Are historic.
Right.
I don't know what their comment, I mean, I don't think there's some restriction on the rest of the buildings there.
They have to be historic. That whole section, because I remember that, I was on the city council then, they made that historic, all those brownstones there. And they have to be historic if someone did some work on them. I'm not saying anything to do with us or anything, but they've had to have done, if anybody did work on the other ones.
Where did you hear it?
If any of the other ones had to have work done on them, they had to have followed the historic oversight. They had to follow, I don't know what you call it,
Because I remember Rosemary went and looked at them, and some of them are just, not done they're just done with very cheap, things in front of them
Well,
and
that might
not
have been also done
carefully.
before.
So I don't,
I don't know. All I'm
where,
saying-
if you can show me, like, your evidence
It's
that
just
it's.
that the historic, you can check with the historical commission and ask them if those brownstones are all historical.
Well, what do you mean by all historical? They might be historically significant, but that doesn't
that's
mean
what I
that.
mean.
But that doesn't mean that, any change that the owner does to it has to be overseen by
it
the
does.
U.S. No,
No, I think the historical commission has to make sure that any work they do is historic. Any work that's done to those buildings on the outside
I don't think
has to
so.
be historic.
I don't think so.
I think
I think
so.
for CPA funds, that's what,
Right.
we have to make sure. But I don't really think that they have some authority to stop people from,
I think they
I
do.
think we need to look into this,
Okay.
because my recollection of the first time that Mr. Tansey came in and talked to us, he said something about if we then put historic restrictions on any work that was done, that would discourage him from applying for the funding.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it
right.
would be very onerous.
Right, and he was really worried when he found out he had to follow the U.S. Secretary of the Interior standards. But then I sent him the standards, and he wasn't sure how specific those standards had to be, but he was concerned that it would be beyond the amount of money that he could do.
But
You know.
presumably, I mean, if he was worried about having to comply, that implies that he doesn't think he has to comply with these restrictions now.
Right,
which in turn-
and he hasn't I
Yeah.
mean, the past renovations done were, he even said, and they were not done in a historic way. So that kind of, you're saying that there's no way that they can do work that's
On the
not
outside.
historically approved.
Just on the, I'm talking about the outside. Go
I
ahead.
think I'd move us quick on this point. I think I sent once before, Amy, Chris Skelly, who is the state.
You were gonna
Historic
have him come
Preservation
to meet with us.
Yep,
Come and have him meet with us, yeah.
Oh,
but he can, he's the absolute authority on all of this stuff.
Chris
He can-
Skelly from
we can-
where?
We can, he's the Massachusetts State Historic Preservation Officer.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And he works, his office is in Boston, but
Oh.
he works out of the middle of the state
I think
somewhere, and he
yeah.
teaches up at UMass in Amherst also.
Yeah.
So, he's a great resource. You can call him, you can email him anytime, and
yeah, I
he'll
spoke to
tell-
somebody.
He'll answer all these
I
questions.
spoke to somebody recently, and I think
Definitively.
it was from there, and because I was wondering if they need to be notified if something's done, and they said only if the project they're getting some state or federal funds, then they would have to be notified. But otherwise, they don't have to be notified or have to approve or anything.
Yeah, this isn't about notification, though. This is about appropriate use of funds.
Yeah.
And the example I'd use here is what Elaine said before. If this is a historic district, if this has been made a historic district in the city, it could have different,
It's not a historic district.
Not a historic district. It's just been, those buildings are, have historical significance.
Yeah, they have significance, but,
Significance.
yeah.
well, every building over 50 years old has historic.
Right, like you said,
significance.
there's almost every building in Holyoke, right?
Yeah.
So-
Okay,
But to Margot's point earlier, to give someone money to do a partial historic
Right.
renovation,
Yeah.
and then they can willy-nilly do what they want with the rest of the property, doesn't really make much sense to me.
Well, they would, I agree that it would, I thought of that too, like, what if there's some sections that are, not doing that? Like, how significant, like, why would this be a great thing if it's just sort of a patchwork? That's true, but, the other thing is that, like with the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, there would have to be a restriction to protect the city's investment in this, that, once this work was done, he wouldn't be able to just rip it out and, change it, or something like that, or sell it to somebody who does change it, within a certain period of years.
I don't know what the ruling on that would be, that's why we should probably have a discussion with this gentleman. Get
No,
some
we
clarification.
absolutely do have to have some restriction. This, I know, from, many conversations with Stuart Saganor, you can't just say, oh, here, okay, take that money, and it's just like with the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, there has to be some sort of restriction to protect the city's investment.
And is he okay with that? You told him that, the gentleman who?
I'll ask, that's another question that, we can ask.
Okay.
So
He could withdraw it and make this simple.
And what?
He could withdraw the application and make this, and no further questions would even be necessary.
Right.
He realizes that
Yeah.
we mean it about the restriction. I know he was very leery about it when it was first mentioned.
Yeah.
there's, so you're right, I pulled the application, there's $22,277 that is being requested for property which.
He doesn't own.
Doesn't own, right.
And which there appears to be some litigation over. So a question that I would have on that whole $22,000 is, what kind of certainty does he have that he's gonna have clear title to this property in the next several weeks? And then the budget for the property that he does own, $6,500 for masonry repair and repointing, and then $1,200 for carpentry repair and painting of decorative room over bay window. That means.
I know.
Is that exterior?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it sounds like it's
I
not.
think I asked that question, and I think he said exterior. Let me just, bay window, but I will look over my notes again. Exterior.
And there's another $9,800 for back facade visible from High Street.
Yeah, that was what I mentioned.
Masonry repair and repointing. It's not clear to me that whether that's on the property he owns or the property
Right,
that he doesn't.
that's what I asked him.
So,
I asked him, it's not clear which building he's talking about, and
is it the ones
he said it relates
if
to,
you own them both, and then we know the answer to that. And then we come into the whole, you're gonna get funding for something that under the historical category, what type of restrictions would the committee require, or what would he agree to? So it seems like there's 4 decent hurdles there,
yeah.
but those are, I would seek some clarification on those.
So maybe what I can do is send the questions that we know of right now so that they can think about them, and when they meet with us, sort of be ready to answer these questions.
You still want me to reach out to Chris Skelly and
Yes,
get him in
yes,
here?
yes, just,
I think I've been in touch with Chris Skelly before. The name is very familiar, so I think I've already talked with him, yeah.
so do you think if,
But if you want to.
You
I
said
think
you
it's-
saw a financial statement from them, a profit and loss statement
Maple Street, yeah.
for the properties that they own?
No, it's,
it's him personally?
that's a good question. I don't know if he specified which property it's for. It's just for his, maybe it's for Down Home Properties, his LLC.
I looked through I didn't see a copy of that. It's in
Oh,
what you forwarded to us. I saw.
I put it in the
deeds.
Google Drive.
I saw, well. Okay, I'll go. Okay, I'll look.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you're emailing us, is the Google Drive? And
Yeah.
you click on that and it opens to, isn't that the same place where the deed is, or am I missing something?
Yeah, it should be, everything should be in the folder that will say Maple Street, you know.
I'll go look.
Yeah, let me know if you can't access
The
it.
deeds came to me in an email that I clicked on, opened, and was able to see, but
Uh-huh.
I didn't see.
Well, he sent a lot of things to me willy-nilly, like lots of different separate emails, so maybe at the time you looked, it wasn't in there. Because I also, you know, he was saying, oh, I'll have you get, you'll get a tax return, but then I ended up getting this email, which I then had to convert into a PDF and put on in that folder.
Okay, that
Yeah.
explains it. Sorry.
Anything else on the projects at this point in time?
What?
Anything else on the projects at this point in time?
Not on the projects, no, that's all I've gotten to
Okay.
look at right now for that.
Any
and-
questions on that? Yes,
Just if we're going on to other business,
yes.
Oh, but we didn't discuss the public hearing, and we
That's
have
what-
to, dis-
Yeah, we're gonna
Oh.
do that now.
okay.
Yeah, we're going to the next item on the agenda, which is
That's-
the, item 3, which is the public hearing plans. And
Yeah, and
before
I-
we get into that, if I may, Amy, I made a big mistake because these hearings that we're gonna be, or meetings, the public meetings that we're gonna be having, do not have to be noticed.
Right, that's what I found out, and I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
I copied it out of the public information.
is that
meeting.
since you already had, but the one question is, you had a public hearing before, and only one is
Right.
required.
Right.
However-
Well, let me put it this way. We had a public meeting. We did not do public noticing. We didn't do.
You didn't do a public notice?
No.
Oh, no.
no,
Then
no.
we have to do it.
Yeah.
Then we and it's very expensive, but I tried to shorten it, but, so I thought you did have a public notice, though, before the one
One
overarching.
on, the one that we had in July, was it July?
You had some
that we-
kind of public notice.
Senior Center, yeah, we didn't do a public, we didn't do,
Nothing in the newspaper? I'm pretty sure I saw something.
well, I don't know. We can find out. We'll find out if we did or not, because,
I know you had a notice.
We hadn't given notice?
okay, I hope you're right.
You had
I
it-
hope you're right.
An important point, which is that we just lost quorum.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
okay. So
does that mean we
anyway,
can't have a discussion anymore?
No,
Oh.
no. So anyways, I'm gonna look into it more, find out if we did, if that was.
Okay, but now that we lost a quorum, there's a problem, there might be a problem, because I was gonna show you the public notice I wrote up, because if the public notice was not done for the other one, or if it wasn't done following the protocol, which is supposed to be 2 weeks in advance and another 1 week in advance, then we really should do that for these meetings coming up, and I have to send them tomorrow, in order to have it 2 weeks in advance.
I wanna check with, the woman who was, what was her name, Rebecca? No, the one that did our preservation plan, Roberta. I wanna check with her, cause she pretty much oversaw that.
But my
so.
concern is that if we didn't do that, the problem is that there's a deadline for the Republican, which is tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, is I
find
had
out from her.
photocopied this for people to look at.
Yeah, I saw it on my,
So if we
I made it shorter.
we have to stop the meeting?
yes,
Stop the meeting, so
Yes.
presumably,
We've stopped, we should
yes,
stop.
the meeting is now over.
yes.
Move to,
Stop the meeting, or we just can't vote?
No, we can't discuss any business.
we can't deliberate.
Yeah, we can't do it.
But isn't deliberate making a vote, or is that also just discussing?
And you guys do a lot more public meetings.
The exact
You do.
words
If
are
the
we,
quorum leaves, that's it, meeting's over?
I believe so. I mean, I don't.
yes,
I thought if you had a quorum and you opened the meeting, but then, and again, I don't know what it makes me think that, but then if you lose quorum, you're still okay, but
no.
and I'm not an attorney, and I have a lot of experience with public meetings, so.
I've never even thought about this, but I would just assume that you lose a quorum, the meeting is over.
Yes, I agree with you on that, because we can't have any kind of discussion.
Council, you go to these.
I've never had it happen before. I haven't been there long enough. You'd have to ask Joe McGivern. Hope you're listening, Joe.
So we might have a real problem.
Well, I will find out for you and let you know before tomorrow. That's all I can tell you at this point in time.
Oh, you'll let me know whether the notice.
Tomorrow morning, whether we had a public hearing or not, and whether it was noticed properly. I'll let you know tomorrow. That's all I can tell you.
So, what if you were to notice it?
We'll have to continue this discussion, but it's $2,000. That's what?
How much?
Well, it's not.
Almost.
It's less than that.
Oh, good, because it was.
$900, so I shortened it and shortened it.
But you have to do two, so that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this,
So it's
you know, is how short I
$2,000,
got it,
yeah.
but this leaves out a lot, like it doesn't have the applicants, but it has the project name, like where the location of the project is.
That's the only way they're making
Can
money
we have
these days, I
can
guess.
we have a meeting Friday if we didn't notice it yet?
So our meeting is noticed.
Yeah.
The Friday meeting's noticed.
Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, but the other thing I just realized is that, you said the sun is free, so maybe, anyway, I know we're not supposed to talk,
Yeah,
so.
no, we can't do that.
Well, I
So,
think actually, according to this thing, deliberation, an oral or written communication through any medium, blah, 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 between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. And I think that, you know, for one thing, this is just a discussion about ministerial stuff at this point anyway. It's not a discussion about substance.
no,
But if we've
Yeah.
lost a quorum, we don't have a quorum, we're not deliberating.
Right,
no.
right. It's the chicken and the egg, right?
Yes.
We're not, you can't deliberate if there's no quorum.
If I read it correctly, it's,
But
well,
we're just talking about scheduling.
okay, so this meeting is adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Yeah. So